Had 1,000 people open in the
Nice.
first like 6 hours.
Wow.
Hi everyone, how are you? I'm Superintendent Diego Ochoa with the San Mateo-Foster City School District. We've been sitting in front of a TV screen that has a little spinning symbol for several minutes, so we just were just chatting about the day's events, and we're super excited to be with you. I have 4 very talented colleagues with me today, and another colleague who's equally talented, who's running this meeting. That's our Coordinator of Communications, Diego Perez. Everybody welcome Diego. Let's give him a round of applause. He doesn't like this kind of recognition, so I try as often as possible to give it to him. And I'm going to let my colleagues introduce themselves, starting with.
My name is Angel. I am a District Science TOSA.
Hi, I'm Ian Kastolik, and I am the Science Program Specialist.
And I'm David Chambliss. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Educational Services.
And Pam Barfield, the Director of Curriculum Instruction.
And many people in our profession know you are the reigning Curriculum and Instruction Administrator of the Year.
I am, for this whole year.
Yay!
I won it last year, but it counts for this entire year.
Not for the whole entire world, though. Just
not for the world,
San
just
Mateo
for here.
and San Francisco counties.
It could be for the world, but I think just here.
We didn't stack it up that way, but it could be.
True.
Yeah. We're here. We're having a little bit of fun, but we're here to talk about something that I get very excited about. It's our science education that we have. As a school district, part of what we went through last year is we went through a big process to adopt a strategic plan. And that strategic plan had a lot of components in it. It was based on 3 goals that we identified. And the first was increasing academic achievement for all students in all subjects. You know, I think every district wants their kids to do better every year. We're not different, right? But another consideration for us was equity. One of our goals is an equity goal, and wanting to disrupt predictable patterns of achievement for groups of kids. And then the third is the social and emotional wellness of students in this district. And what I think is interesting about science education is I think the manner in which we're going to teach science is actually going to help us achieve all 3 goals. And I'm going to sort of prompt us all to go back to that every single time. I want to share a couple of examples as a superintendent, but also just I've been an educator for 23 years. Science, when I was doing science, when I was involved in an activity related to science, was always one of my favorite things to do. I was just sort of finding things out for the first time. Things were happening and somebody was helping me understand why it was happening. So I just thought it was great to have that. But at the same time, I don't know if you all remember the dreaded ion chart.
That's right.
And the periodic table of elements, and just having those worksheets pounded into me. When science went to that other place where it was about memorizing things and writing things down and really copying things, I just felt that like all the energy left. I just couldn't think about why it mattered to write all these things down and try to, and I really didn't know what they were. And we went through a time in education where, you know, it was hard to have the right kind of materials. It was, our science instruction was based on these big books, you know, 295 pages for a 7-year-old, you know, a 12-year-old with a 400-page book. So, you know, as a teacher, what can you really do when those are the tools that you're being given? David, you've been at the helm of our educational services, which is reading, writing, math, science, history, everything having to do with what happens in between the bells of each class. Talk a little bit to the families about what you've set up in terms of adopting new curriculum, because during your tenure, we've adopted new math curriculum, new ELA curriculum, new history curriculum, new science curriculum. So without going into the details about science, just talk to the families a little bit about how we try to adopt materials.
Right, sure. Well, we get a lot of guidance, first of all, from the state in terms of what is meant to be good education, whether it's in English language arts or science, and these are our science standards. And so as we go through and we recognize that it's time to adopt a new curriculum, we start with the framework and those standards to tell us what is good. And then, of course, we identify all the different choices that are out there for curriculum. And most importantly now, especially really across all the content areas, is that we are looking for materials and resources to adopt that we know will engage students in phenomenon first, meaning like what is actually happening in nature and then trying to understand it, or having an opportunity in mathematics to tackle problems from different points of view and talk and engage and understand and argue and disagree and that kind of thing. So we're looking for materials that help us support that kind of learning, not the worksheet kind of passive. And the last, I think, is
and who's in these meetings? I'm assuming you have meetings to talk about this.
Yeah.
Who's at these meetings?
Yeah, well, it's Ian and Angel for sure, but they're actually leading teachers who
Our teachers
volunteered to take on the extra time and task of looking at new curriculum, trying it out in their classrooms, and coming back with, really amazing debates themselves about the strengths and challenges of the materials. So it's that group of folks that ultimately make the recommendation to the board of what materials we're going to adopt.
Yeah.
And the other piece of it for us in our district is we also want to make sure that it's supporting the kind of learning that we know will help students who are typically outside the sphere of success become successful. So what do we do with students who don't necessarily yet read very well in English or speak English in an academic way, but we can pull them in and have them engage in the kinds of conversations that lead and help them to be better readers and better speakers of academic English. So
yeah. When you get to the point where you feel like the group of teachers is ready to make some recommendation, what happens from there?
Well, it's very important to sort of pull together sort of evidence of the teachers' work that they've done together. And then we come to the board first for information, meaning we present the recommendation from our teachers, and we have usually a 2 to 4 week period where then we give our community and our board a chance to look at those materials themselves, and then our board is...
People can come and physically look at the materials, or go online, see the board meeting, look at the information. The process happens from there. Pam, you've been the Director of Curriculum and Instruction for several years. For a couple of years, you were focused on the middle school support. You transitioned last year into focusing more on the elementary support. So you've had actually a little bit of both. You work a lot more with principals than David does, because he has other duties that pull him away from being able to be at sites, but you're with these principals quite a bit. You meet with them often. How do we keep principals involved in this process when we're thinking about adopting materials, and when we're starting to get to the point where we're going to implement? What kind of work do you do with principals related to these science materials?
I was thinking when we first started talking, one of the first things I remember about science when the Common Core standards came out and the NGSS standards came out was they had this Venn diagram. And they had this Venn diagram where it said that science is there in literacy. Math is there in literacy. Science is in math, that they're all together. And I think I heard on something that I was listening to that, a literacy is a content area. Literacy is a domain always searching for content. And so I think one of the things that we talk to our principals about, and we work with them around science, is how do we, because we know just like you had, when kids get to experience science and hands-on, it's more than just reading about something. It's more than just writing is about something. There's a kinesthetic aspect to it. So one of the things that we do with our principals, and we're actually doing this year as well, is we get into each other's schools and we go into each other's classrooms. Because it's one thing when you adopt a program and you're learning about it prior to getting in and seeing it. It's another thing when implementation occurs that you're actually there, watching it and supporting your teachers and listening to what's working and not working, looking at data, looking at, when you think bell to bell. In elementary, it's multiple subjects. So where could we be bringing science in? That's not just during the science period. In middle school, yes, there is a science period, but what are we doing in the science period that's bringing in some of the literacy, some of the mathematics? So I think for site leaders, we are always talking about not only just getting some, maybe an abbreviated training from the programs, but what are we seeing in the classrooms? How are we bringing it to life? And how do we, how as leaders do we give teachers that space and time to collaborate together to figure out what's working and not working? Because we always say no curriculum is going to do everything that we imagine for every single student. So the teachers do that and the principals support the teachers with that.
Yeah, and also because the principals are supervising all these grade levels, and they really, they're often the first person a parent will talk to when they come in with a concern, when a community member interfaces with the school. I go to our schools and I see gardens. I go into classrooms and I see kids growing food. I go into schools where I see a recycling program that's visible, composting. These are all science concepts. So I like to see principals and their staff treat their school like a big laboratory. Think about the science that's all around us. Angel and Ian, you all get really deep into the specifics. We have a new elementary school science curriculum. We have a new middle school science curriculum. I'm going to kick the ball to the two of you. I want to give you a couple of minutes to talk to our parents about let's start with our new elementary science curriculum. What is it and why did we pick it? What was our reason for saying, let's go with this particular curriculum?
Okay. I think the biggest change that came about with the implementation of the Next Generation Science Standards, or NGSS, was the change in how the directives were given to teachers for what students needed to learn. In the past, it was always the student will know, and then fill in the blank, right? The student will know how an atom is put together. The student will know the water cycle and understand, this, that, and that. The new standards say the student can, or the student will be able to design an experiment, explain in detail how removing one part of the water cycle would change X, Y, Z. So it's very much an action-based standards now. And that really means that kids, in order to understand those actions and be able to generate those actions, have to get their hands on materials in order to do things so that they can bring about that understanding. And TWIG, which is our adopted curriculum.
TWIG Science.
TWIG Science, thank you. Does an exceptional job of doing that. It's very accessible to teachers, and it's very exciting for students. When we were going through the piloting process and the choice from teachers and from students, a lot of the teachers polled their students, right? These teachers that were our pilot teachers, we had over 30 of them in our district, one primary and one intermediate teacher at each, just about each elementary school site. Many of them polled their students, and by and large, they came back and said that they wanted TWIG.
I like that. I like that we asked the kids, because I think sometimes we forget to do that.
Absolutely. And the vote, Pam and I were there that day, and we were incredibly surprised because it was unanimous. That every teacher that had piloted this curriculum and the other curriculum said that this is the one that we wanted.
And let me make an announcement for the parents and staff that are watching on YouTube. Part of what we do at these town halls is we encourage families, viewers, participants to actually just in the text chat on YouTube, actually type questions live. It kind of gets my juices flowing. I like that kind of thing. I like getting like the question I don't know what they're going to ask. I think it's kind of fun and exciting. So anybody that wants to ask one, ask us. You got probably don't ask us a math question. We're not like, this isn't the math group. If you want to know about fantasy football, I'm here for that. But science is also a very, tonight's the night to ask those questions that you might have about science. We went with Twig. We want these kids to do experiments. Can you just give me a couple of examples of activities that kids do in this? I know that there's a lot, but what would be some examples of the kind of hands-on activities kids do in Twig Science?
Sure. So I'm going to do one, then I'm going to throw it to you for
Yes,
another one.
sure.
Okay. So I'll do a primary one. One of the ones that they do in first grade is asking students to identify where the water goes. And more specifically, they look at puddles after rain.
Yeah.
And they look at different types of ground cover and talk about what happens to the water and where it goes. And they're working towards the water cycle at that point. And so the teacher has several different water areas outside, and the kids go out and they experiment. They take their buckets of water outside and they pour them into gravel, and they pour them into tan bark, and they pour them into dirt, and they pour them into the grass. And before they do that, though, they make predictions about what's going to happen to that water. And then
that's where they start to learn evaporation, absorption, right? And some of those
Absolutely.
concepts, the science
right.
concepts.
That's right. So that's really cool. And I love that it gets them out of the four walls, right? It gets them outside in order to do that.
Well, and if you think about it, what if we just showed them a picture and told them, okay, I might forget that. But if I go outside with my 4 friends and we have buckets of water and we're pouring water here, there, that might stick a little bit more. It might just, that becomes a, in our profession, a teachable moment.
So I've witnessed this activity, and the teacher's not directing it because they're in groups of 3 or 4, and they're going around with their own buckets to these different areas. And the discussions that these kids have around the area where they're pouring the puddle, it's just phenomenal. There's a lot of learning going on.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You have an example that you're going to share with us?
So in 5th grade, I think last year we remember our district, part of our district turned into like a center workshop.
Yes.
It has like cream of tartars.
Mhm.
We have like baking soda, like cornstarch.
Molasses.
Yeah, exactly. So every time like when people walk by, it's like, what happened to this little corner? It has like all kinds of things. So this was part of the 5th grade investigation on matter mystery hotline. So they are learning about like different substance, like when you mix baking soda together, what would happen with it. And they are using cream of tartars, and they are going to do like a Hollywood movie to see like, hey, what kind of clay would be the best to make, like to be the props of the movie. So it's a very interesting process that they are not just like told to do something, but they are actually given material to try it out. And another one is called Ultimate Playground, and that's when we were trying to look for ropes. So we were going online and looking for like, where can we find like tug of war ropes? And then we were sending that to our teachers, so then kids, they can actually try and figure out how to make the most exciting playground according to a 3rd grader's mind. Yeah, very exciting.
Yeah. I talked to a parent last night. We had a board community workshop last night at Baywood Elementary School. And a parent said, my child made a lava lamp at school today. That was in one of our middle schools.
Yeah.
I thought, that's pretty great. That kid's going to remember that lesson for a long time.
Right.
You can talk to us about Open SciEd.
Yes.
Ian told us about Twig Science. We have this new adoption.
Right.
Open SciEd is another adoptions for our middle schools.
Yeah.
Talk to the families. Why Open SciEd? What's great about it?
Right, definitely. So we actually started this journey, I believe, was it the beginning of 2019 that we
It
started
was
this
the beginning
journey?
of 2019.
Seems like a long, long time ago. And I actually started as a teacher at Abbott Middle School at that time. And I remember Ian sending out an email saying like, hey, who wants to join the pilot group? And I was like, oh, this sounds pretty interesting, not knowing what I was getting into.
Mhm.
And I say yes. And I think we started by going to a fair in the county office, and we were going to like all these different booths, and everyone say that we have something that is NGSS.
Yeah.
And what was surprising was that a lot of materials say that they're NGSS, but when we actually open the books that they're given, it looks the same as the 200 pages textbook that you were talking about before. It was the same thing, and they just put a label, or they just like design an NGSS activity at the beginning of the chapter, but the structure of the textbook was the same as the old type of textbook.
Right.
And we did, I believe we piloted 2 at that time. And then afterward, all the teachers come back together and say like, none of them is really what we want for our students, because we want something that is of a high quality of a for a student. It's not just something that is like we can get by. We want something that is that our student can really think like a scientist. They can really develop the DCI, CCC, and SEPs. And then we try another 2, and then the pandemic hits, and then we try another one after the pandemic. So it's like before, during, and then after the pandemics. And I think what makes open science very different is that it is designed from the ground up after NGSS come up. So it's not just something that they put a label on it. And each of this unit has been previewed by the community that wrote NGSS. And they all agree that open science is a high quality material. Sometimes the teacher can be overwhelmed with the amount of information on the teacher edition. And when we got a chance to chat with the boss of open science, they say that they put more information than needed just to share with teacher like, hey, if you see a student who is English learner, how can you help them? If you see a student that need extra support, how can you help them? If you never taught lesson on light and matters, what are the background information that you need to know? So I think what makes open science very special too is that they don't just go through a different topic every single day. And that's kind of what a lot of students are used to. Is like Monday, we are going to learn lesson A, Tuesday, we're going to learn lesson B. But we are actually only going to go through 4 topics for the whole entire year for each grade level, the very first year. And right here, they're going to spend a few weeks learning just about like the one-way mirror. But then every day they learn a little bit more.
Mhm.
And the teacher are not just giving them the answer at the beginning, saying like, hey, this is the answer to this lesson. But every day they're getting a little bit closer. So we call it breadcrumb, that they are kind of like follow this line of breadcrumb, and then they're going to discover the answer at the end.
I think that's a different way for teenagers to learn,
Definitely.
because I think, and we experienced this with math last year, if you recall.
I recall.
We had, we used some different math instruction. At the elementary level, we used CERN. At the middle school level, we used Math Nation or Desmos. And it's a different type of instruction. It's based more on students making decisions and thinking about math concepts, and it's not a list of 15 questions that they answer correct or incorrect. And that's kind of the same thing with Open Science. It's not a list of questions that a student can finish and get the answers and be done with their lesson. It's a process of making them think about science and make decisions about science that leads to tomorrow's thinking.
Yes.
So we have families that call us and say, what's going on? My child doesn't know if they have an A or not, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Those of us that tended to get high scores in school, we wanted to know, did I get 100%?
Right.
And we're sort of undoing that thinking and more, what do you think about what we're learning?
Right.
What's your best guess? What's your hypothesis about what we're doing and
Right.
how this relates to what we did yesterday and what we're going to do tomorrow? And it's just different for parents to hear that and to understand that. But the bigger picture is when kids learn in this way where they're building up their knowledge, they take away, they master it as opposed to memorize and then later forget that.
Right. Definitely.
It becomes retained knowledge instead of memorized knowledge that, you know how it is.
Yes.
Forget it after a while.
Yeah.
Don't you think so?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, we
remember-
see that in our schools.
Yeah, I remember when I was even in college, I was taking a class and they just asked us to memorize a bunch of like plants and the use of the plants. I got a really good score on the test, but I forget it immediately after I finished taking the test because it's just straight memorization.
Yeah, the research shows you that kind of, they call that rote learning or memorized learning. It just doesn't stick. It doesn't help you down the line. And we want these kids to take with them the foundations of science knowledge.
Right.
Because when they get to high school, we want them taking those advanced placement biology and advanced placement environmental science and
Right.
taking the chemistry classes and physics. And we think this is the foundation. This is where it begins, is getting kids excited about science learning.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It really helps them when they're just thinking about like not just like answering a question on the worksheet, but instead like thinking about what kind of question can they ask? How can they make a conclusion or what kind of evidence they can use as they are sharing their discussions?
Which crosses disciplinary areas. I think both science and math, when the standards came out, they have in mathematics called the standards for mathematical practice, which are K-12, and in science they have the progressions, which are also K-12. And so we've chosen materials that continue to build on those, because by the time students leave, that's what they have. That's that kind of deep knowledge that they can take with them anywhere.
Hey, and it really does relate back to the choices we're making, because these decisions, the TWIG and the Open Science, these are multi-year decisions. We're teaching them this year, we'll teach them next year, we'll teach them. This is legacy decision making. Zern, our decisions that we've made, TCI for the social science adoption. I read an article today. Fortune magazine published an article about Bill and Melinda Gates. They are donating $1 billion with a B to study math education, to study math learning. I think he's worth
More than $1 billion.
110 billion. So he's not giving away the farm just yet. But $1 billion is a great deal of money. In this article, the co-founder of Zern is quoted. Zern is one of the companies he's investing in through this philanthropy, because of how Zern, which we've adopted and we use Kinder through 5, how we are teaching math in a way that challenges the student to be a decision maker and to be a thinker and to be reflective and to communicate their reasoning. How are kids communicating what they learn in science with our new adoptions? What will kids do in our schools to communicate what they're learning about science?
Yeah, definitely. So I think for Open Science, they use an initial model. So a model, it doesn't have to be like a physical model. It can be a drawing model.
Okay.
So students can
Like
use
what I have on my board.
So they can like draw out like why they think this phenomenon is happening. For example, this one-way mirror. Why is it that they cannot see one side, and why is it the other side looks like a mirror? So they
because the
draw it out.
detectives are on the other side, so I don't want them.
Yeah, so they have to explain like what the science behind that. They can use their own words. And for our newcomers too, we encourage them to use their primary language or even simple word to explain what is going on. And so those are some ways that they are sharing about what they are seeing. And then their diagram actually progresses throughout the unit. As they read more information, as they do more investigation, they update their diagram so that they're able to present it, and they are even able to see their own growth when they flip back to their notebook, see the first page, and then they flip to page 20 and see like, wow, they actually learn a lot in between.
It's sort of a record of their knowledge.
It really is. I think it was very it was very mind-blowing when I have the open house last year, and then I put a few box model in the classroom, and I was explaining to parents about what NGSS is about, what open science is about, and this kids, as soon as they see the model, they drag the parents over, and they were like, "Mom, look, this is what this model is about. Like, take a look at this side, take a look at that side." And then they ask their parents, they ask their siblings what is happening, and they are explaining to them. So very exciting.
I think that's what parents want to see.
Yeah.
I think parents want to see that their child understood it
Mhm.
and that their child's excited about it.
Mhm.
We had a meeting a couple of weeks ago. You all were there, and we were talking about claims and evidence.
Mhm.
And I told some of the others in the room, that sounds a lot like our English curriculum,
Mhm.
actually. And you were talking about how these things intersect. What do you all hear from teachers? You have 600 teachers are using these materials. It's a lot of people.
Mhm.
What are you hearing from teachers? What kind of questions do you get? What's on their mind as it relates to these materials?
I'm really glad that you asked. Do you mind if I started?
Sure.
Thank you. This is a real different way for teachers to teach.
Yeah.
Right? They have to really trust themselves and understand the process and understand how they're going to get to where they want the students to go. They go from being great providers of information, and their role changes dramatically so that they become expert questioners.
Mhm.
Because in order for a student's knowledge to move forward, it's important for them to do the discovering themselves.
Mhm.
But sometimes they come up to a bit of a roadblock or mental roadblock, and they need some good questions to help them get past that.
Yeah.
So that they can make those discoveries themselves. So the teacher's duties have changed dramatically, right? From being the instructor and the font of knowledge and the leader up in the front, to being someone who's wandering around, listening in on the conversations, and sharing suggestions or asking questions to help spur on those discussions in the right direction.
Yeah.
So our teachers, the majority of them are embracing that.
Yeah.
There is a learning curve. When NGSS came out, the state of California said, we expect this, once you start teaching an NGSS curriculum, we expect it to take you at least 3 years
Mhm.
before you're good at
Tie
it.
it in, yeah.
Before you're good at it. And that's not how we've been taught as teachers,
Mhm.
right? We've been taught that we need to be experts now, that we don't make mistakes in front of our classroom, and that we're well prepared every time.
Yeah.
That's not what we're asking of teachers now. So it's being embraced, but it's a process. Yeah.
Definitely, I agree with what you said.
You taught at Abbott Middle School.
Yes.
I'm sure you still have coworkers that are there at some of these other middle schools. What are you hearing from middle school teachers?
So I think it's definitely the first time teaching it. It's new. I think so as any pilot that we have done is a very new process of thinking. But something that we have been hearing from our teacher is that the second time teaching the same unit, it gets easier.
Mhm.
And when they are taking a look at, because the roadmap and the routine that they use in every unit is the same. So every unit they go through a driving question board. So in the first unit, they will be like, what is a driving question board? But when they are doing the same thing for the second unit, they know, this is what to expect. It's the same driving question board. We're going to lead students through a few investigations. We're going to lead them through some readings so they get familiar with the process and how to lead the students. We also see that it's easier for the students the second time around because they were not used to asking questions. Yeah,
Right.
they were not used to like gathering in a science circle. A lot of times when our student first do it, we ask them questions. They were like, I don't know. Can they just like pass on to the next person?
Mhm.
Or we even
Because
have
in the curriculum, we're asking kids to tell us what they think.
exactly.
It's different to sit with a class and says, who thinks they know the answer to this question?
Right.
Than to sit with a group and say, we're going to have a conversation about such and such.
That's
What do you
right.
think about this?
It's,
And then a student says, what's the right answer? What do I say?
Yeah,
What,
I wanna get it
They
right.
want to know the right
what
answer.
can I say that's the right answer? And then
Mhm.
so our teachers are saying, well, I want to know what you think.
Exactly.
Well, I want to give you the right answer. Yes, I hear that. Yes, you're going to tell me what you think because it might actually be what Ian thinks too, or maybe David thinks something different.
Exactly.
And I want you to hear what he thinks, but he also needs to hear what you think.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we might end this lesson and we had 4 different ideas.
Mhm.
And that's going to be part of our learning.
Right.
What's really interesting is when those conversations are taking place, especially after an activity that students have done in small groups, they share what they believe they've learned.
Mhm.
In NGSS, students are very much encouraged to respectfully disagree
Yeah.
with another student. So based on my
Yeah.
data, I found this.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
both of them might, I mean, if we're talking about right answers, both of them might be partially right, but the idea that David hears what I'm thinking about and I hear what Pam's thinking about changes my idea about the entire process. And it's that communication and that kind of seminar that they have that really emboldens their ideas about what they think and helps them change their thinking, their thought process.
Well, and I would just add, and when we think about where we hope they head, which is to any of the places around us that do science every day,
Yeah.
that's the kind of science
Career,
they're
yeah.
doing, right? They're
Right.
in all of these companies near us and in the universities, they're collectively exploring and trying to understand and writing notebooks that the knowledge builds over time. So rather than preparing kids to be, good at school, we want to prepare them to be good at science, which will then
Mhm.
connect them to those future opportunities.
And for those kids that don't get into science, they have a great basis of discretionary thought, right? Of how to think through a problem. And it doesn't matter if they work in construction, it doesn't matter if they're in nursing, it doesn't matter where they work. If they have that ability to think through problems based on these experiences, they're going to be have a more well-rounded life in our society and be a very good contributing member too, especially when it comes to their own, what affects them, health insurance costs, who to elect, right? Why do I believe these facts about XYZ that's happening right now? And how can I decide if that's right or not? Those are skills that are transferable regardless of what they go into.
Angel, you've mentioned multiple times the one-way mirror.
Yes.
I have the teacher edition here in front of me. It's really small text, so I'm not going to hold it up. The family's at home. But part of lesson number 8, I'm going to give you an abridged version of it. It's asking the teacher to lead the kids through a conversation about a couple of things. It says, number 1, we have this special material that is silvered, but it only seems to work in certain light conditions. How could we change the light to make the one-way mirror stronger or weaker? So that's an example of a question the teacher would pose to the student. So actually, you two are science experts. I'm not going to ask you, but I'm kind of curious to think like, you know what a one-way mirror is, right? You're standing on one side, you can see over there, they can't see over here. So what do you think? What's your, like,
I'm actually
what
thinking of,
could we
like-
do
I'm actually
to
thinking
make
of
it
tinted-
stronger or
right.
weaker?
Think of tinted windows in
Yeah, could be.
cars.
Yeah. So what do you think?
And like sometimes you can see through them. It's usually when there's a light on the other side. And then I could see what's happening. And there were like when you walk, not that I walk past, when you take walks at night, when you can see inside, it's usually because their lights on. But if their lights are dimmer and there's some tinting, you can't usually see in the window. So I would say something about changing the light behind the.
Yeah,
That's what I
like whatever's
think.
on one side, if it's really bright or if it's not bright at all.
Mhm.
something like that.
Right.
And what do you think?
I mean, I guess, if seeing is actually perceiving light, then there's something
So
about, so, you know, but so, you know, one thing here, if
This is
that,
this is not a
Philosophical.
philosophy
but if
lesson.
that messes with the light that's coming through or not, I'm basically agreeing with my colleague here. If you
I gotta quote
change
that. What do you
the
say? It's
intensity-
seeing is light.
If you change the intensity of the light,
Yeah.
more is gonna come through.
Yeah.
You can actually see in ways that you.
What is
I love that
really,
you didn't take the bait, but she was giving you a hard time too.
I'm well practiced.
what is really funny is that we have an example right behind us
Oh,
with
yeah,
the
that's right.
mirror, with the windows, because we can actually see reflection of ourselves right now.
Mhm.
This room is a lot brighter.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot brighter than
Outside.
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 Yeah.
Right. And then there's a section a couple pages down that says science ideas, and it says light travels in straight lines. And it says, for us to see an object, the light has to leave a light source and bounce off the object and travel in a path to enter our eyes.
Right.
You-
So as a teacher, as you're taking kids through these activities day by day, you're actually building these ideas. So in my classroom, I might have a place where we're charting this.
Definitely.
And you, as my student, you might actually be taking it somewhere in your notebook. Isn't that right?
So for the first one, learning that light should go in a straight line, we actually throw up flowers, like the powders, and then we put a laser through it, and this kids can see that it's actually going right in a straight line. So very exciting.
This is very rigorous. This
Mhm.
isn't easy.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't think we want it to be easy. I don't want to just take out all of the thinking and tell kids to copy this down. Because you could have just told kids this information and then they would write it down and move on. But isn't it, think about what it means for us to have these
Mhm.
activities in our classes where kids are being told, think about this, tell me what you think.
Yeah.
You know, and then,
Mhm.
you know, some of this is actually happening in our classrooms on a day-to-day basis, depending on what the lesson is. Like you pointed out, the water and the gravel, the concrete, the soil, I think you said tan bark. So sometimes we can just walk right outside and try some of this out.
Right.
And I think the kids leave with a much stronger understanding. We're obviously implementing new Open SciEd for our middle schools and Twig Science for our elementary schools, but we're also doing something really fun and innovative for our middle schools. It's a new course that we offer called Career and College Exploration, or CCE. We had a ribbon cutting today at Burrell Middle School for the Wellness Center. It's pretty cool. We have a counselor team there and administration that wanted to create a safe and comfortable space for kids to go during lunch, during school, to meet with the counselor, to be with friends. It's our wellness center. We outfitted it with just the furniture they wanted, and we were there to cut the ribbon. And at the end of it, I invited our county school board member, Chelsea Benini, and our school board clerk, Noria Corzo. I said, hey, let me bug you for 10 minutes. Come with me to our college and career exploration class. And we just walked in unannounced, and I just was so proud. Our students were just doing an awesome job. We had our own ribbon cutting over at Bowditch Middle School. Ian, I'm going to kick it over to you. Talk to these families about this new program. What is CCE as a course? And what are our kids doing in our schools every day?
Thanks. So I think background is necessary to put this into perspective. CCE is a part of a statewide, nationwide program called CTE, which is Career Technical Education. And these classes typically are introduced to students in high school. I'm sorry, I thought I put that on mute.
You said the code word.
What's that?
Anytime he says education, his computer
That's right. It jumps at
it
me.
has a hiccup.
So having some CTE experiences in middle school is kind of unusual.
Yeah.
The idea of this program really is to broaden our students' horizons, to help them think further than where they're thinking now as far as their careers are concerned. Right now, if you ask a middle school student, most, not all, but most middle school students, what they want to do, they mostly are undecided, or they want to be a an influencer,
Yeah.
or they want to be a professional musician. or-
11,000 influencers.
Sure, and
From
there's
San
nothing
Diego.
wrong with that, and some of them are going to become that, but the majority of them answer that because they don't know really what else is out there.
They haven't
And-
thought about it.
Right, they haven't thought about it, and they don't really have an opportunity to think about it because it's not experiential for them.
Yeah.
So our goal with this program is to make it experiential. So we have 16 different modules
Yeah.
that are attended to by 2 students for 2 to 3 weeks. They
Yeah.
work together in order to become immersed
Yeah.
in one of these areas of study. And some of them are like alternative energy, made from my cheat sheet.
Yeah.
Alternative energy, biotech, research and development,
Yeah.
Robotics.
A couple of weeks ago, we were at Bowditch
Yes.
observing this in person. We had a big, beautiful ribbon. Angel, you were there. Ian, you were there. Actually, all of us were there. Diego, who's not on camera, was there. Diego, if you can paste into the chat here the link to the media that you created related to that visit. There's like a video we made, but there's also some photographs and the invitation. I want parents to be able to see that and jump on that. We walked in and saw what looked like a big classroom for sure, bigger than a typical classroom, but we saw a classroom where kids were sitting in these little groups. I think you called them modules.
Mhm.
And I walked up to a student who had 5 toy trucks, like little kid trucks,
Sure.
right? And I said, "What are you doing?" She said, "This is our unit on criminology." I said, "What is that?" She said, "Well, the lesson is about a crime scene and trying to figure out which of these vehicles was at the crime scene." And I said, "So what are you doing?" She said, "Well, I take the toy truck, and I roll it over an ink pad." She had a little ink pad about the size of my phone. So she ran it over the ink pad, and she had a long piece of paper. And she rolled it like this and wrote A, then got another one and wrote B, got another one. I said, "So what happens from here?" She said, "Well, I do all 5 toy trucks, and then I use a magnifying glass, a microscope, and I evaluate the entirety of the tire tracks to try to find the imperfection in the tire that matches the crime scene photo that I have."
Wow.
She goes,
So,
"Then I have this chart that I list this and I explain which car I think it is and why I think that, what evidence I have." Does that sound like sciencey?
mhm,
Evidence, claims,
mhm.
investigation, experimentation, charting, right? Does that, as a science teacher, you're like ding, 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 but also our English
Mhm.
teachers are like, yes, yes, also our math teachers, right? So there's just all this interaction
Cross-content,
that's
yeah.
happening, this
Yes.
cross content that's happening.
Mhm.
Then I looked across the room and I saw somebody making a breakfast sandwich.
Culinary arts.
I asked the student that was with me in the crime scene section, I said, "What are you most excited about with this class?" She said, "I'm super excited to do the culinary arts." I said, "Oh, that's kind of interesting." I said, "Why is that?" And she goes, "My parents don't let me cook anything.
Mm.
They won't let me in the kitchen. I've never made myself something to eat. I want to learn how to make him
Mhm.
a biscuit and an
Mhm.
omelet and a sandwich, and they're going to let me cut it with knives, and sort of."
Yeah.
I was just so pleased that for this student, she told me, "I come to school for this class. I really, really like this
Mhm.
class."
Go.
That's what she said.
That's it.
She goes, "I really like this class, and I'm really excited to be in this class." You see that. You
Oh,
go to
yeah.
these schools, you work with these teachers closely, and
Every day. And what's really cool is that kids that maybe don't click in any of the other subjects will come to school for this.
Yeah.
And some students that are behavior problems in other areas because, well, for a mountain of things, there's a lot of reasons that kids can be behavior problems, but sometimes it's because they're not a good memorizer, right? Or some subject is difficult for them. Here, it's using completely different skills. It's using completely different gifts. and they feel like it's something that's at their level or that they can access easily.
Yeah.
I don't mean to say, when I say at their level, I don't mean to say that the level is low, because it's not.
Yeah.
We're doing veterinary medicine and digital manufacturing, and so it's high level learning and interest, but it's accessing it in a different way.
I worked with a student that day at Bowditch, and he goes, "Can I show you something?" I said, "Sure." He said, he walked me over to these file cabinets and opened it up, and he had 4 different types of structural beams. You know, we have ceiling tiles here, but all of these buildings and all these structures have structural beams in them. So his lesson was to actually design them. And then there's a 3D printer attached to his lesson where he was actually printing them out and building them. So then he walked over and showed me each one and explained each one. Before going to this classroom, I never met the student. He was very articulate. My impression is this is a kid that does pretty well in school from everything that he kind of expressed to me. He goes, "You know, I get really good grades." He goes, "But this class, it lets me experiment. It lets me experiment." And he goes, "I get good grades. I do all my homework." You know, I asked him, you know, "How do you do in school?" He said, "I do really well. But this class, it lets me experiment."
And they get to stress out those beams that they're making and
Yes.
measure how much weight they can handle before breaking too.
Yes.
And so that's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's at every middle school.
At our
Bayside.
largest.
Yeah, Bayside, Burrell, Bowditch, and Abbott.
Yes.
Pam and David, you work with these principals. What do the principals say about student interest? Do they like this class? You know, what are you hearing from these folks?
I think they love it.
Yeah, I mean, they're already talking
Yeah.
about trying to figure out how we can staff for more sections next year, because they're already, the word is passing through all the kids who aren't in the class, and they're expecting a large demand.
I don't know what we said, but the other cool thing about it is the teacher doesn't have to be the expert in all these things. Like the teacher is just kind of facilitating, almost like what we talked about in science before, right?
Yeah.
It's the students are getting the opportunity and they're figuring it out, and
Very much so.
just beautiful.
They're involved and engaged in their own learning.
Yeah.
Yeah. David, you were one of the first people to see this program. You went up to Portland, right?
Yeah. You came on and said, this is kind of interesting. And Ian and I and Angel were like, okay. But there was this opportunity to actually go up and see it live. And
I've sent you a very brief email. I went and looked at it.
Yeah.
And it
Said,
took
"Hey, there's
about-
this program that's kind of interesting. Let me
Yeah.
know if you're willing to go to Portland."
I mean, I don't even, probably wasn't even a half a day before we were like, oh man, we got to figure this out. It really
And then we
is.
came back and we invited our principals and we took them. They didn't go out of state, but they stayed local.
Yeah.
They went to go see some of these
Yeah.
programs. I think in Monterey, Salinas, some different places. Came back pretty excited.
Yeah.
It was a 4-month process. We have incredible donors and supporters with Gilead who facilitated a $250,000 donation for us to be able to offer these. The programs do cost more, and I think they're worth every penny because we are investing in kids. This program is something kids like. This program is teaching kids a lot. The teachers of the class are facilitators in those classrooms. They're not lecturing to kids for an hour a day. Kids are jumping in and getting started on their learning. Right? We saw kids using a drone. They coded the drone. We saw kids. 2 boys were doing a lesson, a 2-week lesson on marketing and media related to interior design. But that was so cool. And they were super into it. They said, "Oh, this is like really fascinating to think about how to market something and use media to be able to do that." Diego's over there getting a big old smile off camera.
There's a lot of modules too that are very much hands-on, like home maintenance.
Small engines.
Small engines, right? Where folks take apart engines and learn how to put them back together and diagnose problems. It's really
And we,
cool.
and the modules ask students to, once they've sort of engaged with this particular kind of hands-on activity, what are the kinds of jobs that
Oh,
you
that's
do
right,
this
yeah.
in?
Mhm.
What's the kind of, the amount of schooling that's required for those jobs? It actually connects them to live
Mhm.
listings in our Bay Area of where can you find this job and even apply for it. So it really,
Yeah.
it brings it all the way
Mhm.
through the, like, if I'm really interested in this, what are the
Mhm.
paths I can follow from it?
Yeah. Gilead was a big supporter for us.
Thank you,
Gilead
Gilead.
Sciences here in Foster City. Amazing supporters. The San Mateo-Foster City Ed Foundation facilitated the grant process, and we're really thankful for their support and
Mhm.
partnership. Another aspect of it was our work with Lego. This summer, we were able to secure a grant for $250,000 for Lego programming. We put additional funding into it. I think we were preparing something like 7 or 8 classrooms over this October
Mhm.
break. I went over to Brewer Island and
Mhm.
saw them putting the finishing touches on their Lego lab. So I know that school's was done over the break. I know that others, I think you told me earlier today, College Park recently had theirs get finished up. Talk a little bit about the Lego program, what we're doing with it, and what parents can expect to hear from their kids.
Right. So I was not a Legoite growing up. I never had Legos. One of my boys dabbled in Legos, but wasn't a crazy person at all. So this was new to me when I came on board, but I am sold. When you look into the research of play, it's really remarkable how much play-based learning engages students and how the learning that they're doing transfers to other subject areas. So in Lego, we have kits, typically 2-person kits, but not always.
Yeah.
There's some open-ended different kinds of things going on. But kids are playing together to create something. Through that, they're learning a lot about process. They're learning a lot about how to work with another person. They're learning a lot about controlling themselves. So
Listening.
right? Engaging with another person. The pedagogy of playful learning, I'm reading off my screen now, is grounded in playing towards specific learning goals. And when kids can learn these social emotional skills, those transfer to working on math problems that they don't understand or are struggling with. They transfer directly to their English learning ELA program and how to maneuver through that. We can use Lego activities to facilitate deeper learning with science concepts or with math concepts. I was just at an activity this afternoon with my Lego leads at some of our schools. And one of the activities that we did was math-based. And each color Lego was given a monetary assignment, like it's worth 5 cents or it's worth $1.20 or it's worth 3 cents. And the goal was for them to get a $1.85 in in Lego pieces and then build something with it. And so their $1.85 creation was here, and they had to talk about what that was and why. So you can use Legos in order to not only spur creativity, but to reinforce what you're doing in ELA. They read a story and the teacher brings a set of Legos out for everyone, and the students are told, please create a scene from a pivotal moment in this story, something that was really important in the story. And so the kids build that, and they're deepening their understanding of the story, and then they share that with their partners, right? And then they go back to class if they've done it in the Lego lab, and they write out their story. So the depth and reinforcement of learning is there. It's not just a one-off to play with Legos, as fun as that is, and as helpful as that can be.
And it's not independent. It's shared. It's shared
Absolutely.
activity. So if we bring together 20 kids and we say everyone's going to do this worksheet, and we give everybody a piece of paper and a pencil, and we have them busy for 30 minutes, at the end of it, you'll have a piece of paper with some writing on it, and you'll have a quiet classroom, and you'll have 2 or 3 kids falling on the ground, and my stomach hurts, and you know, if I was in the class, I'd be tapping my pencil and running off and pinching somebody, and you know, wanting more engagement. And then take those same 20 kids the next day and put them in pairs and give them each Lego materials with simple instructions and say, go and watch what happens. Videotape that and show that to parents and say, which to you looks like learning? And see the conversation, the compromise. You and I are building this thing together. Come on, Angel, we can't just use all your ideas.
Right. You have to work together.
Work with me here.
Yes.
I'm not your assistant, I'm your partner. And I think that's what we want. We want kids listening to each other, talking to each other, learning from each other, experimenting and failing, trying it again.
How about bringing some joy to learning?
Right.
Right?
Right.
I mean, this does that, and it doesn't have to be, as I say, and as teachers are concerned with, rightfully so. It doesn't have to be a one-off.
Yeah.
You know, it can be something that's integral to your way of teaching and to your classroom.
I like the thing that you're connecting it to either literacy or math, because I think sometimes when you're in the classroom and you're informally assessing, you might say like, oh, you just read that, tell me what you read, versus we just read that or we did this. Show me.
Yes.
Because you're showing and you're telling, right? You're showing, like it's like that moment to think about it, create, and then I can tell you even
From
more.
there.
Great.
Yeah.
We're gonna leave it there. What we talked about tonight, obviously adoptions and curriculum, but let's really celebrate the joy of learning. Ian, Angel, David, Pam, Diego, thank you. Thank you everybody for being with us. Have a good night.
Yeah.